call the policy meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Second item on the agenda is approval of the February 16th Policy Committee meeting.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Policies for first reading. Tonight is policy BEDJ, public participation at board meetings for review. Paul.
So I had asked this to be added to the agenda and review just because I was trying to figure out how we protect the staff in certain scenarios. I think Ms. Harrington communicated with the city attorney and we have some feedback, and I think the general consensus is to show all the data we collected so we can kind of review it as a body and then find out from our legal advisements and ask the superintendent, assistant superintendent to make sure that they're in compliance with the DOE standard, the state law, so on and so forth. So, Ms. Harrington, if you wanted to kind of leave what we found.
Yep, sure. So Attorney Wark with the city, he put together like a preamble that we could consider reading prior to our public comment sessions. It's something for the committee and the board to consider. If we do that, it would probably be better to have it included within the actual policy as well. So I'll hand that, take one and pass it down. And then the other thing that we have to consider is the guidelines for public comment that's been also put together by Councilor O'Rourke for the City Council. They have not seen this yet until April, so this is premature. They haven't adopted it yet, so it'll go to vote this April. But it's something for us to consider when looking at this type of thing. And I think to Mr. Lynch's point, to try to collect the data, I think Mr. Pappas has some policies from other districts in the surrounding area. If we can put all this information together for us to review and ask administration to check with the city attorney to see if it's aligned, if it's legal, what we legally can include in our policy, and try to be aligned to what the city is going to be doing.
Mrs. Stokes?
And I appreciate this, and I'm hoping we're going to have time to look it over. I think I agree with the fact that we want to protect our staff, but I also think we need to make sure that we're keeping the First Amendment rights of people to be able to say, you know what I mean? Like, so I guess I struggle with who makes that determination on whether or not it's okay. You know, like, I guess I just want some real good definitions. Is it we're not allowed to say the person's name? Is it the title? You know what I mean? Like, so okay. So I guess for me, you know what I mean? Like, so we have people come up and praise our district, which is great, and I love hearing it. But I also think that we want to make sure that we hear the negative things as well, not necessarily against our staff, but we can't fix what we don't acknowledge. So I think there's just that fine line that we have to make sure that we're allowing people the chance to be able to use their free speech and say something, and then clear lines as to what's not allowed or allowed. Because I agree that we need to make sure that we protect our staff, but we also need to make sure that that's where the public comes and talks to us. We have policies on there, not really supposed to email us. They have to follow their chain of command. Like, I just want to make sure we're not restricting them from being able to come and talk, and that's just my concern.
And I think that's the intention when we collected the data for you guys to review. In no way, shape, or form are we trying to cap or limit what they can or can't say, but we don't want to expose staff members and administration to something that may not be legal either. So it's about finding the balance. That's why we wanted to put all this data together and see if it made the most sense. I think in lieu of that, having the assistant superintendent, the superintendent work with the legal teams to make sure that we're not violating any parameters inside those same spectrums, I think that's what's important, so that's why I asked for that.
Okay, are we gonna share these to the public so they can see what we're potentially planning?
I think they'll become part of tonight's record.
Yeah, they'll be
Okay.
back up.
I just want to make sure.
Mrs. Keen?
Yeah, well, my understanding of the state law is that anyone can speak. And I noticed in a neighboring community, they didn't allow somebody from out of town to speak. And I think that's against the law. But the problem is, be careful about who you select for your chair. The chair should have, maybe need some extra training as to what they can and can't do, but the chair should make sure the meeting goes the way it should go, with proper whatever. So,
And I think if our policy is clear about, you know, how you address a complaint with specific employees, you know, the correct way to do it. I think our policy should be very clear about what's okay to say and what isn't
Yeah.
okay.
probably naming people is where you get the problem.
Probably. Shane?
So I wrote down a bunch of stuff that I wanted to hit on, because I'll end up forgetting it, so I'm just gonna read it off. How I feel about this policy, how it came about. So I understand the public's concern with the proposed changes. I'd like to take a minute, remind anyone listening that there is a process when concerns arise. The board also has to follow this process. If someone has an issue with their child's teacher, they need to discuss the issue with that teacher first. If things aren't resolved, you must go to their building admin. If it needs to be taken further, they would then contact central office to speak with Mr. Rapucci or Ms. Hebert. After all those actions have been taken, then it's appropriate to contact the board. The best way to communicate issues with the board is email. This keeps a paper trail, and we also can respond, letting you know that we've observed that we have your email, and we can take it from there with the superintendent. The board also gives the district staff the opportunity to work out any issues with families. We welcome families to speak at public comment, but doing so before exhausting the avenues I mentioned is not a productive way to resolve an issue. Discrediting staff with unsupported information also not a productive way to resolve an issue. We have certified and qualified staff, and we have to allow them to adequately do their jobs. I fully support the chain of command, and I'll make sure that has taken place before stepping in as a board member.
Matt?
I have a lot of information I want to disseminate, and I'll pass out stuff. And Shane, I agree 100% with you, and all of that is spelled out in our policy KL, which is titled Public Complaints, which I have a copy of for everybody. So I'm going to start off with the state law on public comment. Ms. Hubert, I think you have a copy of that, right? So feel free to take one, pass around. I think there might be some extras down the end. And on the state law, just make note at the end of section 1, I mean, I'm happy to say it out loud. It just says, nothing in this section shall restrict school boards from establishing other reasonable standards for public comment period, provided such standards are imposed equally for all speakers. School boards may reasonably restrict public comments that disclose student personally identifiable information, teacher personally identifiable information, or other confidential or privileged information. Doesn't define what those are. So, policy KL, which I just mentioned to Mr. Downs. I have our policy, I put in Dover's policy, and I put in Oyster River's policy, and I put in Portsmouth's policy. So all for us to take a look at, to digest. I don't expect us to read it tonight, so you have an idea of what other districts have. Ours is one paragraph. If you look at Dover and Portsmouth, theirs are like a page and a half. Oyster River's is very similar to ours. Also, public participation at board meetings, which I think is in our backup. I have ours, and I have Dover, I have Oyster River, I have Portsmouth, and that's it in this stack. So you can compare ours to everybody else's. You'll find a lot of similarities. Mainly because it comes from the recommendation from the New Hampshire School Boards Association and their lawyers and what we should include in our policies. So most districts take what they recommend, and then the local school boards can change the wording any way that they feel necessary. So lots of information to digest, lots of information for you to kind of read over for our next meeting. I assume that we'll probably be discussing this for a while.
Thank you. Do you want to say something, Ben?
I just want to remind everybody that the intention here is to have the superintendent, assistant superintendent compile this and confirm we can get some articulation together that we're in compliance to all those things. In no way, shape, or form do I think me, or I would speak on behalf of everyone here, no one wants to limit what people have the right to say, but we do have to protect staff. So making sure we're all inside the rules, and one of the things that I think it's Shane, Mr. Downs brought up was there is a process, and in our current policy, it makes it hard. I feel like it's a little open-ended, so I don't know if I can or can't use it. So I think some clear definitions, as Mrs. Stokes recommended, and if you'll see from Mr. O'Rourke, he made some very specific examples, and those are great references for us to have a better understanding of how that would work. So it's just really, it's a lot of content, and the intention is to just make sure everyone's protected. Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
I also just feel like we also need to touch upon the fact that if somebody's that upset and they're coming before the board, we need to find the root cause of that. Because I feel like in the 10 years that I've been on the board, it's never been like this. So I don't know how to find that root cause, but you know what I mean? Like, I agree, have the policy, make sure that, we're clear in defining it, but then why are we having these complaints? Like, what is the issue? Is it communication issue? Is it, I don't know. I feel like that also needs to be addressed, because I think the goal, I would assume, of this board would be that we don't have disgruntled parents coming before the board and being upset with our staff. So I don't think we're educated in order to handle that, but I think that we should maybe ask the superintendent, like, how is there a process in which to say, we've kind of gone off the rails a little bit, and not with all of I think a lot of our parents are very happy, but with the ones that aren't, is there a way in which to bring our community back together? Does that make sense?
Also, I think there's some discrepancy on what the purpose of talking about this is tonight versus what's been out from what I've read in social media. If you look at what's in our in our backup, the language that's in red is to be deleted, which is the restrictions of personal complaints. So the plan, at least the proposal, is to remove that from our policy, subject to our debate and approval.
And that had been in there prior to and was removed and was brought up again and discussed, and so I wanted people to be able to see it. So the underlined red part is not going back from where we had it, and it has been advised not to go back in, but I wanted everybody to see what had been changed from the last time, so it doesn't get mixed up with the law.
Right. So there's no intention of keeping that or having that as part of our policy, at least at this point.
That's good clarification.
Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pappas. That is good clarity. So that was removed the last time we did the policy in April 2022 because it would not stand up in court. It violates First Amendment speech. But then looking at our current policy, I feel like it's too loose. We don't have enough guidelines within our current policy to be able to decipher protected versus unprotected speech. And that's why I think it's important to revisit this, just so that we're clear, the chair's clear, the public's clear on what is acceptable and what falls under First Amendment rights versus what is considered to be unprotected speech, which would fall into defamation. So this is also to protect our citizens who are speaking, because if it is unprotected speech, then they're liable and we're liable, and then that comes back to taxpayer dollars if it becomes a lawsuit. So it's also to protect those speaking as well.
I also, thank you, because the clarification was really helpful to me. I'm also hoping that our staff and our public are watching and seeing this and getting the backup material and are gonna add input as to what they feel, because I wouldn't want somebody coming before my job and complaining about me, 100%. But I also don't feel like, when we're writing it, what is the step for them? Do we offer a non-public where they can come before and a non-public to talk about? You know what I mean? We don't really have that clear definition of there's a next step, but I don't even know what that step is. So I think making sure we have that avenue so parents are aware of it. But I think this is a good way of opening up that dialogue. So, you know, I think our staff should weigh in. I think our public should hopefully weigh in a positive way. And again, they'll have the backup of everything that we were given tonight. So I think that's important for that as well. So I look forward to hearing from them.
Any other?
So just more of a point of question. So at this point, it's going back to the administration. They're going to come back next month with any recommendations or from legal, right?
That was my intention, yeah, for them to kind of come back and say, this is what we think, and then you guys can craft the articulation, but make sure we're in compliance, so there is no violation from any of the outside entities.
Okay, great.
Would it be appropriate to have a statement in our policy about resolution? I mean, public comment to me seems a not very effective way to resolve any issue that you're having, because we can't have a dialogue in public comment.
Right.
So nothing's going to get resolved during public comment. And unless that complainant, that person that has the problem, takes it a step further with administration, it just dies there. You know, it dies. Yeah.
Well, I think that goes back to what Mr. Downs said, there is a process, right? There is a
Right.
procedure, it's documented very clearly on how to move forward. So if you go with your teacher, from your teacher, your building admin, from your building admin to the assistant superintendent, if you don't get the resolution you need there is a process in which you can get to the board. But the process has to be followed. It's for the protection of everybody involved, so it just makes the most sense.
Shane?
Do we need to get the process out there so people are aware of the channels they have to take? Because it sounds like they are maybe not aware of what they need to do to, if they have an issue with an admin, then they go right to the superintendent. If they have an issue with the teacher, do we need to get that out there to the public to let them know before they get us involved, or?
It's almost like there's a preamble here suggested by the city attorney. There almost should be a post statement if there's a complaint issue that would guide the next step.
Maybe that's something you guys add.
The superintendent did have that as one of an action item he was working on, and I believe it's on our website. I should check with Kyle. It's already on our website. Maybe we need to call, highlight, put a flying bird over it, whatever.
Or at the end of public
But
comment.
it is in, on our website that lists, that was a big thing we wanted, like, what Shane talked about, teacher, building admin, and so forth, and it lists that, it's all outlined on there.
But it would be nice to remind the person who, by the time they get to public comment, it's emotional.
Having that resource, yes.
Having that reminder after public comment or after the speaker is done to say, we can't resolve your issue right now, but here's the next step you should take. Karen?
But I think when you made the comment about somebody comes to public comment and we can't respond, there is no avenue minus I get the chain of command part. But, you know what I mean, like, there is no avenue, so we need to create that as well. We have public comment at the end of our committee meetings, we have public comment at the beginning of our full school board meetings. We need to have a clear and decisive way, because, you know what I mean, I agree with you, I'd love to have dialogue, but it never happens, so how do we change that? And again, I'm not saying it's because of the negativity, but even with something positive, there's no interaction, and I wish that would change, because you should be able to ask clarifying questions or interact. Our board should be interactive with the public at certain extent, At a certain extent, not all the time.
But it can't be as one member. It has to be the entire board's.
Correct, but we
Response.
limit that, is what I'm saying, so when we're talking about all of this, we need to make sure that that's considered.
I do agree with you having a post, like the preamble, a post-amble, maybe something as simple as we print a bunch of these and leave them on the podium. So after you leave public comment, there's a document with instructions right on it. Maybe that's something we do to help. And it's not because people don't know where to go, but you're right, there's emotions there. So if we can make it simpler where if they're frustrated by something, they can then have a document in their hand when they leave the podium that clearly identifies the steps in which they have to follow.
Matt?
The document that I was discussing, and I think it touches upon everybody's concerns, is general FAQs for parents and community members.
Ms. Gaines?
The problem, as I see it, is they come with their situation, they describe it all to the board, and the board sits there like, you know, Indians on the log, and we don't say a word, and there's no resolution that says, okay, this will go to committee X, or this will go to the superintendent, or this will go,
Right.
it has to, I think the person complaining has to know there's a step beyond their coming and speaking,
Right.
that it will be dealt with, not just ignored.
Right.
That's where I think the
We
breakdown
can't, we
is.
can't respond because we have to respond as a board.
Oh,
And in that
well,
moment, we don't know the feeling of the board. We're 13 people sitting there, each with our own thought and opinion. It would take time, but I agree, there needs to be a statement. I like the idea of the slip of paper, because it's easier to read something in writing than to hear it.
I agree.
So that might be something to consider as well. Shane?
So not everybody comes to public comment. We'll get emails with complaints, and so is it something where we should just put in the student's backpack, it goes home with them, so we know every single student, every single parent in the district got the policy? Is that something that we, because we need to make it very simple, and we can't make it complex,
Well,
because.
if we have it on our website, we can direct.
But the thing with the website, some people don't use technology. It's just how it is. So some people still want paper in their hand.
So maybe it's something we do after we
Papers in the
rewrite.
backpack from the beginning of the
I
year.
get you,
Taken
I
out.
get it, but
I
You
think,
mean the black hole?
I'm sure you guys can assess the best way to dissipate the information after you make the amendments we've discussed. You guys gotta do your homework and see what we
Yeah.
can use and do, and then move forward from there.
Does anyone else want to say anything before we?
So I think, should we make a motion, refer this to the superintendent, and then bring it back to committee for further development?
Here,
Would that
free
be
to
the
make the
formal thing?
motion, sure.
So my motion is that we, with materials provided, as that the superintendent, assistant superintendent, consult with legal counsel, NHSBA, and DOE for clarification on what can and cannot be put in there to protect all rights, publics and our employees, for further review by the policy committee. And I know that was a long motion, I'm sorry.
I have a first and a second. Any other discussion before I call for vote?
I just want to make sure that what you're saying, I want to make sure I understood it, was if somebody comes before the school board and makes a complaint, there should be a next step. Because I agree with that,
That's right.
correct? So it doesn't go on deaf ears. And I understand what you said, Ms. Grassi, is we're 13 and we have to listen to it and hear it all before we can make some decisions, which I think is a smart thing. But I think that's something that, it's kind of like I want to make sure that we're picking that up. Like, if somebody comes before the board, whether it's a complaint or not, what's the next step for that person? Because I feel like that's where we're hearing it, it goes, and then the person might leave frustrated because there's no next step. So I would like to see the next
might
step.
not be anything the board is in charge of.
But there might.
But that
there
person
be a
should
next step.
know, I would think that
Right.
that person should know what the next step may be.
Point of order,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
There is
there is a motion on the
motion
floor,
on the
and the
floor.
discussion's really good, but I think it's a separate issue to the motion that's on there.
I didn't think it was not relevant because it's going to Kyle, and I wanted to make sure that was part of it. That's why I thought it was relevant, just
Okay, I
to
see
be
where the
clear.
angle you're going to.
Right.
Anything else? I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Moving on. Policies for second reading this evening are policies DID inventories with no changes and policies DIE audits with minor changes.
So moved.
Second,
What's the motion?
To move them on to the full board for second reading
Could
and
you
adoption.
state the motion? Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Just trying to be quick.
Yes. The motion is to move it on to the full board for second reading and adoption. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? 5-year plan. I don't believe we have anything tonight for the 5-year plan.
the only thing is just your ongoing projects that you're working on, but you can wait till after it's communicated on the website.
And the next meeting for the 5-year committee is on Monday at the high school. Where in the high school?
We're gonna meet at the front door, get our tour from Mr. Todd.
What day?
Monday, the 20th.
That's right. Those chairs that can't make it are asked to make sure that the vice chair or a designated committee member is present.
Yes.
Next item is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment?
Yes, please.
If we could have your name and address, please.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Thank you.
My name is Tiffany Peavy and I have 2 children in the district. I would like to thank you for clarifying that the red part is to be taken out and not put in, because I did not know that. I thought it was being put in. I would just like to say on that subject that if you're going to say that the public can't say names for negative comments, then the public should also not be able to say names when there are positive comments, because it should be equal for everyone involved. Okay. On November 3rd, 2022, I came in and addressed the privacy issue in the locker rooms. It was discussed in that meeting that the policy would come up with something to stop the use of phones in bathrooms and locker rooms in our schools. As of now, policy hasn't had any discussion on that topic. This falls under if you say you're going to do something, do it category. I ask that you make a policy that states you're not allowed to use phones in the bathroom or the locker room, and this goes for everyone, teachers too. Also, we have a policy that the children are not allowed to use their phones during academic times. They are allowed to use them in between classes and at lunch. Can we please amend the policy so that it includes the teachers? I understand the teachers use their phone for communication between each other during the day, but that can wait until in between classes and at lunch. Right now, we're telling the kids it's unacceptable to use phones during class, and then the children are seeing the teachers on their phones while class is in session. We need to lead by example. Another policy I would like to discuss is always having a parent present when a child is having a mental health crisis. A child that is having a mental health crisis should never be left alone. I hope you all discuss this and come up with some good policies. I'll be waiting and watching and hoping you do. It's come to my attention that some people are not happy with the way that some of us are speaking. All I can say to that is I am who I am. I'm emotional and I'm passionate because these are my children. I would hope that you be as emotional and as passionate as I am about your children or your friends' children or your neighbors' children, because we're all in this together. Showing your emotions is not a weakness. It shows that you actually care. It actually takes a lot of strength, because when you show how you feel, people can ridicule you for it. I'm not going to stop being me. I'm trying to change things for the better for all the children. My voice is stronger than theirs and I can help them, so why wouldn't I? Although I enjoy hearing the fun and positive things happening in the district, I would much rather hear. Last month we had 4 fun-filled Saturdays where we used different methods that are fun and informative to help our children improve their test scores. I am proud to say that test scores have gone up 20%. Now I know I made that up, but this is what I'm longing to hear, that we are taking action on improving our district scores. I do not want to be here, but I feel like it's my duty to fight for the future of my children.
Anyone else like to speak?
Just to clarify, when you ask for an address, you're violating the law. There are people in this state, in this city, who have protective orders. And when you do that, and this minute gets published, it gives away their location, not a smart move. First Amendment rights, I'm glad to see we're making some changes. You all got a copy of the email that I received from Jerry Grossman, correct? I got one response, and thank you for that response, you know who you are. Finally, somebody stepping up, honest. We have conflict of interest in here, galore. You guys have given me the opportunity to do the digging, and I appreciate that. I skipped the last time because I was busy trying to figure some things out. There hasn't been a conflict of interest filed with the city since 2017 to 2022, June, as a matter of fact. If anything's been added since, it's to cover up what's going on. We have one member, I'm not gonna call out names, I said in the email I wouldn't, so we're just gonna do what we have to do. Sits on the board of Primex, vice president, I believe. Isn't Primex associated with NHSBA, the very cause of these problems? Don't you work on their template that takes away your rights and my rights to speak and respond and work out these problems? It's disgusting. These are children. You know, children are the closest thing to God, and you guys play their games like, it's unbelievable. You have a special ed program that is suffering. And I know for a fact, because my granddaughter's in it, and you now know it. It took you 2 weeks to figure out who I was. All of a sudden, my daughter's getting retaliation. I got that email from Mr. Grossman. It's not appreciated, and it's not going to go unfounded. I'm already above you. I'm already on the next step. I won't be back after tonight because I'm going forward with everything. As far as your First Amendment policy, refer to Clay versus Laconia 2015. Look at the recent case in Pennsylvania where they had to pay a guy $300,000 for telling him he couldn't call out somebody by name. If you can't do your job, I'm a supervisor. You need to be called out by name and be replaced. I spoke 3.5 minutes the last time, 1 month from today, and all this. What was it that tipped you off? Fraternization? Maybe that's why the special ed department is suffering so much, because she's not being held accountable for not doing her job properly. 14th Amendment guarantees the same education for every child, regardless of ability. Very clear, doesn't get any more clear than that. But yet you want to take academics and give them functionality and say they can't read? When this child read the name off my shirt, knows me as Grandpa, but called me by my first name? Come on. Maybe the supervisor needs to start holding her accountable. Or is there a reason why you're not, sir? That's what I thought. We'll look at your computer. There's a lot of people here need to be replaced. We've got another one that works for a flooring company and votes on money that's going to pay for jobs for that flooring company. We've got another one that works for the police department. And I like you, I really do. I like what you've been doing. You say some great things, but you've got to be pretty upset with this case with the child that got struck by a teacher being squashed the way it has. Check into what happened in court today. That's far from over. It's pretty disgusting. You know, I just feel, I stand here and you guys make such good points. Why can't we talk this over and hash this out? Why do I have to go to the next level and spend my time to make sure that this works right? It's ridiculous. My daughter won't come here. She's scared of retaliation. She doesn't have the money to fight you. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm ready. My official title, so that you know, and I'm not just a troublemaker, I'm Reverend Timothy Wells. I do this for children because they are godliness. You guys play games with the closest thing to God. You people are disgusting at what's going on with the special ed department. They don't lie. They don't have the capacity. And your cronies on Facebook attacked me for my religion the last 2 weeks since you found out who I was. I can show you the screenshots. I've been called a far-right Trumper who supports January 6th. I don't support any violence. I don't hate anybody. I try to find grace in everything. But right now, with what I see here, corruption doesn't define grace, does it? Not at all. And again, I thank you for responding to my email. The rest of you, I don't understand. 2 people made a decision for this board who acts as one. You should be very upset. That email grossly violated my First Amendment right. The mayor told me that attorney wasn't available that day. That's why he was carbon copied. Then who forged his digital signature? Was it you? You carbon copied him. Either he sent the email or you forged it. That's according to the mayor. I sat in with him last Friday. Had a great talk with him. There's a lot going on here that needs to come forward. You offered me closed doors meetings? No, this is a public problem. This needs to stay in the public. This needs to get fixed. Whether people resign, which should be happening immediately, if not sooner, especially 2 of them, or we can just have an emergency election and remove everybody. Do we have the reason? I'm gonna do an RSA 91A, not with you guys, because I'm not gonna wait a year. It took 20 minutes for the Board of Education to give me the one I had waited a year for. Now I'm gonna do one for your bonds, the value, and the holding company, and we'll go from there. Thank you for your time.
Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Is there any other matter?
At our full board meeting last week, we talked about the need, or at least figure out what we need to do for exit interviews as employees leave the district. I don't have any suggestions at the moment, but I'm wondering if anyone would like to offer any suggestions. I know that that's something that's been talked about over the last few months.
Yeah, I know I'm the one that brought it up, possibly building a policy for that, or looking into, just like we're doing with public comment, seeing if other districts have a policy that put into place, because it sounds like some people are getting the exit interviews, a lot of people aren't, so obviously we gotta make sure everyone's offered it, and we gotta decide on how we wanna go about it. Like, I know I was at a job before where I did an exit interview before I left, so I think we need input on why people are leaving the district.
Is that something we can ask the NHSBA if they have a recommendation, or if they have districts that have it?
I'm sure they must cover it. I'm sure Matt, you know.
I don't off the top of my head, but certainly I'm sure we can find out, and if not, then maybe the New Hampshire School Administrators Organization.
Yeah. Matt?
I'm just wondering if we should actually bring this forward to, this should really go to personnel to review, and then they can refer back to policy once they figure out what they want to do, and then we can look at policy.
That makes sense.
Or what has not been done or done.
Right.
The person, are you talking about the email that we were sent? Isn't there an email as well?
It's the same
Well, I
way,
think that part is part of it, but I think we can talk about it over the
Yeah.
last few
So
months.
I'm gonna request that anybody that, I think it was last August that the person left, so we know that there's some kind of disconnect there. So is there a way that we can find out from last August till now who is left and resend them out a letter? At least the process that we do now? Because I agree that we need to look at I just did my exit interview today at my school. But I think we need to at least offer those people that have left to make sure that there was some disconnect, and they need to be offered that exit interview. I was offered a couple people to do mine, you know what I mean? So I don't know, like, I don't know that we should just offer one potentially, because if the person that they have the issue with is the one doing the exit interview, that might not necessarily be the greatest. But I would think that at least the people that we've already had that leave should be sent a letter stating that we would still like to do the exit interview and apologizing for the lateness of it. There was miscommunication somewhere.
Paul?
If we can ask the assistant superintendent to put that on the personnel agenda in April, just exit.
The exit interviews?
Yeah, just put it on the agenda so we can at least have it on the record for talk, for
Yep.
conversation. And then I think it's probably process, we'll talk about with the superintendent how that system works, evaluate it, and see if we should write a process to it.
Including Karen's request
Yes,
to
Well,
personnel?
shouldn't we already do that since we should have already done it? That's just saying we should have already sent that letter,
right, I think we
correct?
gotta, yeah.
I took it as 2 different requests. One,
Yeah,
Karen's
I
looking
just-
for taking care of the past,
Right, I
and
think
then Paul's looking at it reviewed for future.
follow the policy that we've already
I got
followed
you.
and sent. I don't wanna wait to send those
Right.
letters out.
That's why I was asking
Yeah, ask Kyle
clarification.
if he can look into that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Shane?
So a couple things on what they talked about at public comment about using phones in the bathroom. I hope we're not using phones in the bathroom, I hope if teachers see it, they're addressing it. I would think right? And if we can maybe get a memo across to our staff, making sure that's being addressed, that if they see phones out, that they're put away. And also, I agree, teachers being on the phones while they're in the classroom, unless it's obviously work-related, they shouldn't be, their task should be focused on the students. So I don't know if that's another memo we can get addressed to the staff as well. And the other thing, I know she mentioned about mental health crisis, I'm assuming, I'm not really up to speed in the schools, what we have to offer. Obviously, I know we have to offer for what I do, but is the staff aware of what to offer these students when they feel they're in mental health, when there's a crisis there? Yeah, are they up to speed? Are they aware of what's going on there? Just curious.
So your question is, are staff aware of what to do
Like
with a child?
resources to
Yes.
reach out to for.
So staff are trained each and every year on suicide prevention and awareness. And then we have staff that are trained on the CPI model for crisis intervention. And so they also know who is part of that team.
Okay.
I also don't remember everything that the person came before public comment to speak. I know that the last time somebody came, they followed up with an email, so that would be really nice to have, because I think some of the concerns were, but I think the concern about the bathroom, I think that was building, correct? Because there wasn't doors or there was.
Yeah.
So I would maybe make sure that either, do we contact building and make sure that they're aware that there's an issue still with the bathroom and follow up, or should that person? That's where the disconnect, I feel, sometimes happens. So,
The issue is the shower curtains.
Yeah.
well, right, but it kind of goes along with the bathroom issue, so
The privacy.
if there's doors, is there a concern with the, I mean, I agree, I don't think phones should be in the bathroom, but if there's, I think it just kind of comes back to, did we fix the issues with the doors or the curtains or that kind of thing? Because if it's still open, you know what I mean, like I kind of feel like we just have so much on our plate. So can we request that that be brought up at building to check those bathrooms since it's not our committee? Can we add that to the agenda?
I
Yeah.
believe they did put curtains up, and I'm thinking that maybe the high school handbook might have something in it about phone use in the bathroom. I mean, I think that would make sense, that it would be,
Yeah.
it would be in the handbook for children where they're permitted to use a phone and not.
Thank you.
Just,
Yes,
if I
Matt.
may, I remember, I was the one who brought up the request to have a policy about phones in the bathrooms and banning them in the bathrooms and whatnot. And I remember having a conversation with the superintendent, and I think that might be my ball that dropped it as far as not pursuing it after that, so.
Well, do you remember there was a lady though, I think it might have been the same person that said the bathrooms didn't have any, so I'm just thinking if there's still an issue, I think where we sometimes drop the ball, and not you, but as a board, I would just like to make sure that the bathroom issue is still being addressed. And if we have curtains, the concern was that those curtains aren't gonna last. How are they being upheld? How's it going with that?
I think those are all issues for the building committee.
Right, so that's why I mentioned putting it on the agenda for building.
Any other? Accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.